You never really know how thin the walls are between your world and something else until you hear it breathing on the other side. I learned that the hard way, in a house that was never supposed to be haunted, in a town that prided itself on being too new for ghosts. My name is Daniel, and I used to think horror stories were just that, stories. Until the night I met the thing that watched me sleep. It started with the lights. Not flickering, not going out, but something subtler. I'd come home from my late shift at the hospital, exhausted, and find the hallway light on when I was sure I'd turned it off. Or the lamp in the living room would be dimmer than usual, casting long, strange shadows across the carpet. I blamed it on faulty wiring, maybe a bad bulb. I told myself it was nothing, because that's what you do when you're alone and tired and the world feels just a little off. But then the noises began. At first, it was just the house settling, creaks and groans, the kind you hear in every old place. But my house was barely 10 years old, and the sounds didn't match the wind or the rain. They came at odd hours, always after midnight, always from the same spot, the hallway outside my bedroom door. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth. Sometimes they'd stop right outside my door, and I'd hold my breath, waiting for the handle to turn. It never did. I started sleeping with the lights on. Just a small lamp, nothing too bright, but enough to chase away the worst of the shadows. It helped, a little. The footsteps faded, replaced by a new sound, a low, rhythmic breathing, as if someone was standing just out of sight, waiting for me to fall asleep. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was my own breath echoing in the quiet, but deep down I knew better. One night, I decided to confront whatever it was. I set up my phone to record audio, left it running on my nightstand, and tried to sleep. The breathing came, slow and steady, and I forced myself to stay awake, listening. Hours passed, and eventually, exhaustion won. I drifted off, the lamp casting a warm glow over the room. I woke up to silence. The lamp was off. My phone was gone. Panic shot through me. I scrambled out of bed, searching the room. The phone was on the floor, screen cracked, battery dead. I plugged it in, hands shaking, and waited for it to power up. When it finally did, I opened the audio file. The recording was nearly 4 hours long, most of it filled with the soft hum of the lamp and the occasional rustle of sheets. But at exactly 3:17 a.m., the breathing grew louder. Closer. I could hear my own breath, shallow and quick, and then, another voice. Not a word, not a whisper, but a guttural, inhuman sound, like something trying to speak through a mouth that wasn't made for words. The lamp clicked off. The breathing stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, a single, sharp intake of breath, right next to the microphone. The recording ended. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep for a long time after that. I started leaving the house at night, driving aimlessly through empty streets, anything to avoid being alone in the dark. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just stress, but the fear never left me. It clung to me like a second skin, a constant reminder that something was waiting for me in the shadows. A week later, I came home to find the lamp smashed on the floor, the bulb shattered, the cord frayed. My bedroom door was open, even though I always locked it before I left. On my pillow, a single, perfect handprint, too large to be mine, too long in the fingers, pressed deep into the fabric as if something had leaned over me while I slept. I moved out the next day. I left everything behind, the furniture, the clothes, even the phone. I couldn't bring myself to take anything that might have touched whatever was in that house. I found a new place, a tiny apartment in the city, surrounded by noise and light and people. I sleep with the lights on every night. I haven't heard the breathing since, but sometimes, when the city is quiet and the shadows grow long, I wonder if it's still watching. Waiting for me to turn off the light. I never believed in superstitions. Mirrors breaking, black cats crossing your path, stepping on cracks, none of it ever meant anything to me. I was a rational person, a science teacher, the kind of guy who explained away every bump in the night with logic and reason. But there are some things you can't explain, no matter how hard you try. Some things that stare back at you from the other side of the glass, waiting for you to notice them. It started on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of lazy day where the world feels slow and safe. I was cleaning the bathroom, scrubbing toothpaste stains from the sink, when I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror. Just a flicker, a shadow at the edge of my vision. I turned, expecting to see my wife or maybe the cat, but the hallway was empty. I shrugged it off, finished cleaning, and went about my day. But the feeling lingered. Every time I passed a mirror, I felt eyes on me. Not my own reflection, but something else, something watching, waiting. I started avoiding mirrors, turning my head as I brushed my teeth, shaving in the shower, anything to keep from meeting that gaze. My wife noticed, asked if I was feeling all right. I lied, told her I was just tired, maybe coming down with something. That night, I dreamed of mirrors. Endless hallways lined with glass, each one reflecting a different version of myself. Some were older, some younger, some twisted in ways I couldn't describe. But one stood out, a man in a dark suit, his face hidden in shadow, standing perfectly still in the center of the frame. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me with eyes I couldn't see. I woke up sweating, heart pounding, the image burned into my mind. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling only grew stronger. The next day, I caught the shadow again, this time in the hallway mirror. It was gone in an instant, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. I started covering the mirrors at night, draping towels and sheets over the glass, but it didn't help. The dreams kept coming, each one more vivid than the last. One night, I woke to the sound of glass shattering. I stumbled out of bed, heart racing, and found the bathroom mirror in pieces on the floor. My wife stood in the doorway, eyes wide with fear. She said she'd heard a voice, low and cold, whispering her name from the other side of the glass. I tried to comfort her, tried to convince her it was just a bad dream, but I could see the truth in her eyes. She'd seen him too. We replaced the mirror, but the feeling never left. Every reflection felt wrong, every shadow stretched just a little too long. I started seeing the man in other places, store windows, car mirrors, even the surface of my coffee in the morning. Always the same dark suit, always the same hidden face. He never moved, never spoke, just watched. I became obsessed, researching mirror folklore, reading stories of haunted glass and cursed reflections. I found tales of the Watcher, a spirit said to live in the space between worlds, drawn to those who notice him. The more you see him, the closer he gets. The only way to break the connection, they said, was to destroy every mirror in your home and never look into one again. I tried. I smashed every mirror, covered every reflective surface, but it didn't matter. The man was still there, waiting in the corners of my vision, growing clearer with each passing day. My wife left, unable to take the fear any longer. I was alone, trapped in a house filled with invisible eyes. The last night, I saw him standing in the living room mirror, closer than ever before. I stared into the glass, unable to look away, as he raised a hand and pressed it against the inside of the mirror. His fingers were long and thin, the skin stretched tight over bone. I felt a cold pressure against my own hand, as if the glass was thinning, about to break. I ran, leaving the house behind, never looking back. I live in a small apartment now, no mirrors, no glass, nothing that can reflect. But sometimes, in the darkness, I see a shape moving at the edge of my vision. I know he's still there, waiting for me to slip, to look into the wrong window, to let him in. I waited, shifting from foot to foot, glancing down the street for headlights. After what felt like forever, the bus finally appeared, headlights cutting through the fog, engine rumbling as it pulled to a stop. The doors hissed open, and I climbed aboard, nodding to the driver, a man I'd never seen before, his face hidden in shadow beneath the brim of his cap. I paid my fare and made my way to the back, settling into my usual seat. The bus was empty, except for a woman sitting near the front, her face turned toward the window, and an old man hunched over a newspaper a few rows ahead. I put in my headphones, closed my eyes, and let the motion of the bus lull me into a half-sleep. The city slipped away, replaced by the steady rhythm of the engine and the soft glow of the overhead lights. I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, the bus was moving through a part of town I didn't recognize. The streets were narrower, the buildings older, their windows dark and empty. The fog pressed against the glass, thick and impenetrable, hiding everything beyond a few feet. I glanced at my phone, no signal, no time, just a blank screen. I looked around. The woman was gone, her seat empty. The old man was still there, but he was staring straight ahead, eyes wide and unblinking, hands gripping the newspaper so tightly his knuckles were white. I tried to catch the driver's eye in the rearview mirror, but he didn't look back. I stood, making my way down the aisle, and asked him where we were. He didn't answer. He just kept driving, hands locked on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. I tried again, louder this time, but he ignored me. Panic started to rise in my chest. I turned to the old man, asking if he knew what was happening, but he didn't respond. He just kept staring, lips moving silently, as if reciting something only he could hear. The bus slowed, coming to a stop at a corner where no streetlights burned. The doors opened with a hiss, and the fog rolled in, thick and cold. I hesitated, unsure whether to get off or stay. The old man stood, shuffling past me, and stepped into the fog without a word. I watched as he disappeared, swallowed by the darkness. I turned back to the driver, desperate for answers, but he was gone. The seat was empty, the wheel spinning slowly as if guided by invisible hands. The bus began to move again, doors still open, fog pouring in and filling the aisle. I stumbled back to my seat, clutching my bag, heart pounding in my chest. The city was gone now, replaced by endless rows of abandoned buildings, their windows staring like empty eyes. The bus moved faster, the engine roaring, the lights flickering overhead. I tried to open the doors, to jump out, but they wouldn't budge. The fog pressed in, cold and damp, seeping into my skin. I heard voices then, low and distant, whispering my name. I turned, searching for the source, but the bus was empty. The seats were torn and stained, the windows cracked and dirty. I saw faces in the glass, pale and hollow, watching me with empty eyes. I screamed, pounding on the doors, begging to be let out. The bus slowed, coming to a stop in the middle of nowhere. The doors opened, and I stumbled out, falling to my knees on cold, wet pavement. The bus pulled away, disappearing into the fog, leaving me alone in the darkness. I looked around, but there was nothing, no buildings, no lights, just endless fog and the sound of my own breathing. I wandered for hours, calling for help, but no one answered. Eventually, I saw headlights in the distance, and a bus pulled up, doors opening with a familiar hiss. The driver was the same man, face hidden in shadow. I climbed aboard, too tired to protest, and took my seat in the back. I ride that bus every night now, trapped in a loop I can't escape. The city is gone, the world outside lost to fog and darkness. Sometimes I see other passengers, lost souls like me, staring out the windows, waiting for a stop that never comes. If you ever find yourself on the last bus home, pay attention to the driver. If you can't see his face, don't get on. Some rides never end. I grew up in a small town surrounded by endless forests, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and secrets are hard to keep. But the woods kept their own secrets, and we all learned early on to respect the boundaries between our world and theirs. My parents warned me never to go into the forest after dark, never to follow the voices that sometimes drifted through the trees. I thought it was just an old wives' tale, a way to keep kids from getting lost. I was wrong. It was the summer I turned 17, the last summer before everything changed. My friends and I spent our days swimming in the river, riding our bikes down dusty back roads, and our nights sitting around campfires, telling stories and daring each other to do stupid things. One night, after too many sodas and not enough sense, someone suggested we spend the night in the woods. Just to prove we weren't afraid. We packed our bags, grabbed flashlights and snacks, and set off down the old logging trail that wound through the trees. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the woods felt alive with the sounds of birds and insects. We found a clearing, set up our tents, and built a fire, laughing and joking as the darkness crept in around us. As the night deepened, the woods grew quiet. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the trees, and the air grew thick with the scent of pine and smoke. We told ghost stories, each one more ridiculous than the last, until the laughter faded and a heavy silence settled over the group. That's when we heard it, a soft, whispering voice, drifting through the trees. At first, we thought it was just the wind, but the voice grew clearer, calling our names, one by one. It sounded like someone we knew, a friend or a family member, but twisted, wrong. The whispers circled the clearing, never coming closer, always just out of sight. My friends grew uneasy, glancing at each other, trying to laugh it off, but the fear was real. One of us, Jake, always the bravest, stood up and shined his flashlight into the trees, calling out, demanding to know who was there. The whispers stopped, replaced by a deep, unnatural silence. Then, all at once, the woods erupted with movement, branches snapping, leaves rustling, shadows darting between the trees. We huddled together, clutching our flashlights, too scared to run, too scared to stay. The voices returned, louder now, overlapping, echoing through the woods. They begged us to come closer, promised safety, warmth, secrets only we could know. I felt a cold hand brush my shoulder, and I spun around, shining my light into the darkness. For a split second, I saw something, tall and thin, with eyes that glowed like embers, watching us from the shadows. Panic took over. We grabbed our bags and ran, stumbling through the underbrush, branches clawing at our arms and faces. The voices followed, growing more frantic, more desperate, until they were screaming, shrieking, filling the night with a sound that didn't belong in this world. We burst out of the woods, collapsing on the side of the road, gasping for breath, hearts pounding in our chests. We never spoke about that night again. Jake moved away at the end of the summer, and the rest of us drifted apart, haunted by memories we couldn't explain. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the whispers again, calling my name from the edge of the woods. I keep my windows closed, my doors locked, and I never, ever go into the forest after dark. Years later, I returned to my hometown for a funeral. The woods were still there, unchanged, ancient and silent. I stood at the edge, staring into the darkness, and for a moment, I thought I saw eyes watching me from the shadows. I turned away, heart racing, and promised myself I'd never come back. Some places are meant to be left alone. Some secrets are better left buried. If you ever hear your name whispered from the woods, don't answer. Don't look back. Just run. I've always been a skeptic. Ghost stories, haunted houses, cursed objects, I'd heard them all, and I never believed a word. I was the one who laughed at horror movies, who rolled my eyes at tales of things that go bump in the night. But there's something about seeing the impossible with your own eyes that changes you forever. My story isn't about a ghost or a monster. It's about a room. A room that shouldn't have existed, and the night I found it. It was the first week in my new apartment, a creaky old building in the city's historic district. The rent was cheap, the neighbors were quiet, and the place had character, high ceilings, crown molding, and floors that groaned with every step. I spent my days unpacking boxes and my nights exploring the neighborhood, trying new coffee shops and wandering down unfamiliar streets. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to leave my old life behind. One night, after a long walk, I came home to find the hallway outside my apartment darker than usual. The overhead light was out, and the only illumination came from the faint glow of the exit sign at the end of the corridor. I fumbled with my keys, unlocked the door, and stepped inside, grateful for the warmth and the familiar scent of cardboard and coffee. As I set my bag down, I noticed something strange, a draft, cold and sharp, coming from the far end of the living room. I followed it, expecting to find a window open or a vent loose, but instead, I found a door. A door I was certain hadn't been there before. It was old, painted the same color as the walls, with a tarnished brass knob and a keyhole that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. I stared at it, heart pounding, trying to remember if I'd somehow missed it during my move-in. But I knew every inch of that apartment. There had never been a door there. Curiosity got the better of me. I reached for the knob, half expecting it to be locked, but it turned easily in my hand. The door swung open with a low creak, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of earth and something older, something I couldn't name. I should have closed the door and walked away. I should have called the landlord, asked about hidden rooms and secret staircases. But I didn't. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and started down the stairs, each step echoing in the silence. The staircase seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning, the walls closing in around me. My flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper. I counted the steps, 20, 30, 40, but the bottom never came. Just when I thought I'd made a mistake, that I'd somehow gotten lost in my own building, the stairs ended in front of another door. This one was different, newer, cleaner, with a polished silver handle and no keyhole. I hesitated, listening for any sound from the other side, but there was nothing. Just silence, thick and absolute. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was empty, except for a single chair in the center, facing a blank wall. The air was colder here, the silence deeper. I walked around the chair, shining my light into the corners, searching for any sign of life. There was nothing, no windows, no vents, no way in or out except the door I'd come through. I sat in the chair, more out of exhaustion than curiosity, and stared at the wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, words began to appear, written in a dark, oily script that seemed to seep from the plaster itself. "You are not alone." I jumped to my feet, heart racing, and backed toward the door. The words faded, replaced by new ones. "It sees you." I fumbled for the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. The room grew colder, the air thick with the scent of rot and decay. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but my voice was swallowed by the silence. Then, I heard it, a low, guttural breathing, coming from behind the wall. The plaster bulged, as if something was pressing against it from the other side. I backed away, clutching my flashlight, as cracks spread across the surface, spiderwebbing out from the center. The wall split open, revealing a single, bloodshot eye, staring at me with a hunger I'd never known. I screamed, dropping the flashlight, and the room plunged into darkness. When I woke, I was lying on the floor of my living room, the door gone, the wall smooth and unbroken. My flashlight was on the coffee table, batteries dead. I moved out the next day, leaving everything behind. I never found the door again, but sometimes, late at night, I feel a cold draft and hear the sound of breathing, just beyond the wall. People always ask why we're drawn to horror stories, why we seek out the things that make us shiver, why we listen to tales that keep us awake at night, why we stare into the darkness and dare it to stare back. Maybe it's curiosity, or maybe it's something deeper, something older, buried in the part of our brains that remembers what it's like to be prey. Fear is a survival instinct, a warning system honed over thousands of years, but in the safety of our homes, it becomes something else, a thrill, a challenge, a way to remind ourselves that we're alive. I used to think I was immune to fear. I'd watch horror movies with the lights off, read ghost stories alone in the dark, laugh at the jump scares and the monsters. But real fear isn't about what you see on a screen. It's about what you can't see, what you can't explain, what you can't escape. It's the feeling of being watched when you're alone, the sound of footsteps in an empty house, the cold breath on the back of your neck when you know you're the only one there. There's a science to it, of course. Fear triggers the amygdala, floods your body with adrenaline, sharpens your senses, makes your heart race and your skin crawl. It's a rush, a high, a chemical cocktail that can be as addictive as any drug. But there's a line between the fear you choose and the fear that chooses you. The stories I've told so far, about the watcher in the night, the man in the mirror, the endless bus ride, the whispering woods, the room that wasn't there, are all about that line. About what happens when you cross it, or when it crosses you. Some people say horror stories are just entertainment, a way to pass the time, a safe way to flirt with danger. But the best stories, the ones that stick with you, that haunt your dreams, that make you sleep with the lights on, are the ones that feel real. The ones that make you question what you know, what you believe, what you trust. The ones that remind you that the world is bigger, stranger, and darker than you ever imagined. I've spent years collecting these stories, listening to people share their nightmares, their close calls, their brushes with the unknown. Some are skeptics, like I was, looking for a rational explanation. Some are true believers, convinced that the world is full of things we can't see or understand. Most are somewhere in between, caught in that gray area where doubt and fear overlap. What I've learned is that everyone has a story. Maybe it's a shadow in the corner of your eye, a voice calling your name when you're alone, a dream that feels too real to be just a dream. Maybe it's something you can't talk about, something you can't forget, something you wish you'd never seen. Maybe it's nothing at all, just a feeling, a hunch, a sense that something isn't right. But the stories keep coming, and the fear never really goes away. It just changes shape, hides in new places, waits for you to let your guard down. That's why we tell these stories, why we listen, why we keep the lights on. Not because we want to be afraid, but because we want to understand. Because we want to believe that we're not alone in the dark. So if you're listening to this, if you're lying in bed with the covers pulled up to your chin, if you're glancing over your shoulder at every creak and groan, remember this: fear is a part of being human. It's what keeps us safe, what keeps us sharp, what keeps us alive. But it's also what connects us, what binds us together in the face of the unknown. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's what saves us. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to write into a horror channel. I always figured those stories were exaggerated, or made up entirely. But after what happened to me last winter, I can't keep it to myself anymore. Maybe if I share it, I'll finally be able to sleep through the night again. Maybe someone out there will believe me, or at least understand why I can't go back to my childhood home. It started with a noise. Not the usual creaks and groans of an old house settling in the cold, but something heavier, more deliberate. I was home for the holidays, staying in my old room at the top of the stairs. My parents had left for a weekend trip, and I was alone, just me and the family cat, Milo. The first night was uneventful, just the quiet hum of the heater and the occasional thump of Milo chasing shadows. But the second night, I woke up to a sound above my head. A slow, dragging scrape, like something heavy being pulled across the attic floor. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the wind, or maybe a raccoon that had found its way in. But the sound came again, closer this time, right above my bed. Milo hissed, his fur standing on end, and bolted from the room. I lay there, heart pounding, listening as the scraping turned into a series of soft, deliberate thumps, moving from one end of the attic to the other. The next morning, I checked the attic door. It was closed, the latch still in place, but I noticed something strange, a thin line of dust disturbed on the floor, leading from the door to the far corner. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was up there, watching me. That night, the noises started earlier. I sat in bed, clutching my phone, listening as the thumps grew louder, more insistent. I texted my parents, asking if they'd ever heard anything strange in the attic, but they brushed it off. Old houses make weird noises, they said. I tried to believe them, but Milo refused to come back upstairs, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Around midnight, I heard a new sound, a low, guttural breathing, so close it felt like it was coming from inside the walls. I grabbed a flashlight and crept into the hallway, heart hammering in my chest. The attic door was ajar, swinging gently on its hinges. I should have run, should have locked myself in the bathroom and called for help, but something compelled me to climb the stairs, to see what was making that awful sound. The attic was cold, the air thick with dust and the scent of old wood. My flashlight beam danced across boxes and forgotten furniture, casting long, twisted shadows on the walls. The breathing grew louder as I moved deeper into the darkness, until I found myself standing in front of an old trunk, its lid slightly open. I reached out, hands shaking, and lifted the lid. Inside, I found a pile of old clothes, yellowed with age, and beneath them, something that shouldn't have been there, a small, wooden box, carved with strange symbols I didn't recognize. The breathing stopped. The attic fell silent. I picked up the box, feeling a sudden, icy chill run through my body. The air seemed to thicken, pressing in on me from all sides. I heard a whisper, so faint I almost missed it, "Don't open it." I dropped the box, stumbling backward, and the lid snapped shut on its own. The attic door slammed behind me, plunging me into darkness. I don't remember how I got back to my room. I woke up the next morning in bed, the attic door closed, the house silent. Milo was curled up at my feet, purring softly. I tried to convince myself it was all a dream, but when I went back to the attic, the trunk was gone. The corner where it had stood was empty, the dust undisturbed. I left that day, cutting my visit short. I haven't been back since. My parents say the house feels colder now, that Milo refuses to go upstairs, that sometimes they hear footsteps in the attic when no one's home. I don't know what I found up there, or what I almost let out, but I know one thing for sure, I'll never open that door again. Every town has its own urban legends, stories whispered between friends at sleepovers or passed around campfires, each one a little different but all sharing the same core of fear. In my town, the story everyone knew was about the midnight caller. It was the kind of tale you'd laugh about in the daylight, but at night, when the world was quiet and the shadows seemed to move on their own, it was impossible to shake the feeling that it might be true. The legend went like this: if your phone rang at exactly midnight and you answered, you'd hear a voice on the other end, soft, cold, and impossibly distant. The voice would ask a single question: "Are you alone?" If you answered yes, the call would end, and nothing would happen. But if you answered no, if you lied, the voice would know. And then, it would come for you. I never believed it, of course. I'd heard the story 100 times, always with a different ending: someone disappearing, someone found wandering the streets in a daze, someone waking up with no memory of the night before. It was just a story, a way to scare kids into turning off their phones and going to bed. But then, one night, I got the call. It was a Friday, and I was home alone, my parents out of town for the weekend. I'd stayed up late, watching movies and scrolling through my phone, the hours slipping by until I realized it was almost midnight. I was just about to turn off the TV when my phone rang. The screen was blank, no name, no number, just the word unknown. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the answer button. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. For a moment, there was nothing, just static, soft and distant. Then, a voice, so quiet I almost missed it. "Are you alone?" My heart skipped a beat. I almost laughed, thinking it was a prank, but something about the voice made my skin crawl. It was flat, emotionless, as if it was being spoken by someone who'd never learned how to feel. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, waiting for something to happen, but the house was silent. I shook my head, telling myself it was just a coincidence, just a wrong number, just my imagination running wild. I turned off the TV, locked the doors, and went to bed. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the voice, echoing in the darkness. I got up, checked the locks again, made sure every window was closed. I even checked the closets, the basement, the attic, anywhere someone could hide. But the house was empty, just me and the silence. At 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, moving closer to my room. I froze, listening as the footsteps stopped outside my door. The handle turned, just a fraction, then stopped. I held my breath, heart pounding, waiting for the door to open. But it never did. The next morning, I found muddy footprints in the hallway, leading from the front door to my room and back again. The door was still locked, the windows still closed. I checked my phone, the call log was empty, no record of any call at midnight. I never told anyone what happened. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, a trick of the mind, but I know what I heard. I know what I saw. And every night since, I turn off my phone before midnight, just in case. Because some stories are more than just stories. Some legends are warnings. If your phone ever rings at midnight, and a voice asks if you're alone, remember this: don't answer. And if you do, whatever you say, don't lie. I never thought much about the house I grew up in. It was just a place, 4 walls, a roof, a yard with a swing set that creaked in the wind. My parents bought it when I was 5, and we lived there until I left for college. It was old, built in the 1920s, with narrow hallways and doors that never quite closed all the way. My mom called it charming. My dad called it a money pit. I just called it home. But there was one thing about that house I never understood, something I never talked about until now. At the end of the upstairs hallway, just past the bathroom and before the attic stairs, there was a patch of shadow that never seemed to go away. No matter how bright the sun was, no matter how many lights we turned on, that corner was always dark. My parents said it was just the way the house was built, the way the light fell through the windows. But I knew better. The first time I saw it move, I was 8 years old. I'd gotten up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, tiptoeing down the hall in my pajamas. As I passed the shadow, I felt a sudden chill, like I'd walked through a wall of ice. I glanced over my shoulder and saw something shift in the darkness, a shape, tall and thin, with eyes that glowed faintly in the gloom. I froze, heart pounding, unable to look away. The shape didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with those cold, unblinking eyes. I ran back to my room, dove under the covers, and didn't come out until morning. I tried to tell my parents, but they just smiled and said it was a bad dream. But the shadow was always there, waiting at the end of the hall, just out of reach. As I got older, I tried to ignore it. I'd rush past that spot, never looking directly at it, never lingering in the hallway after dark. But sometimes, late at night, I'd hear footsteps in the hall, soft, slow, dragging across the floorboards. I'd lie in bed, covers pulled up to my chin, listening as the footsteps stopped outside my door. Sometimes, I'd see the doorknob turn, just a little, then stop. I never opened the door. I never wanted to know what was on the other side. One night, when I was 16, I stayed up late studying for finals. The house was quiet, my parents already asleep. I got up to get a glass of water, and as I walked down the hall, I felt the temperature drop. The shadow was darker than ever, thick and heavy, pressing in on all sides. I tried to hurry past, but something grabbed my arm, cold, bony fingers wrapping around my wrist. I spun around, hard in my throat, but there was nothing there. Just the shadow, deeper and darker than before. I ran back to my room, slamming the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I started leaving the hallway light on, even during the day. But the shadow never faded. It just waited, patient and silent. The night before I left for college, I stood at the end of the hall, staring into the darkness. I wanted to say goodbye, to prove to myself that it was just my imagination. But as I watched, the shadow shifted, forming into the shape I'd seen as a child. It raised a hand, long and thin, and pointed at me. I felt a wave of cold wash over me, and for a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, just as suddenly, the shadow melted away, leaving the hallway empty. I left the next morning, and I've never been back. My parents sold the house a few years later, and I heard the new owners renovated the upstairs, knocking down walls and adding new windows. But sometimes, late at night, I dream of that hallway, of the shadow waiting at the end, watching, always watching. I don't know what it was, or why it chose our house. Maybe it was always there, waiting for someone to notice. Maybe it's still there, hiding in the darkness, waiting for the next family to move in. All I know is that some shadows never go away. They just wait for you to come home. There's a moment, just before you fall asleep, when the world feels thin, when the shadows in your room seem to stretch a little longer, when every creak and sigh of the house sounds like footsteps just outside your door. It's the moment when your mind drifts between waking and dreaming, when the things you try to forget come creeping back. That's when I remember the light. I was never afraid of the dark as a kid. I'd wander the house at night, reading by flashlight under the covers, sneaking snacks from the kitchen, staring out the window at the empty street below. The darkness was just another part of the world, something to be explored, not feared. But that changed the year my grandfather died. He'd lived with us for as long as I could remember, his room at the end of the hall always filled with the scent of pipe smoke and old books. He was the one who told me stories, who taught me how to play chess, who left the hallway light on for me every night. After he passed, the house felt emptier, colder, as if something vital had gone with him. The first night after the funeral, I woke to find the hallway light on, brighter than ever. I got up, confused, and walked down the hall, expecting to find my mom or dad. But the house was silent, everyone asleep. I turned off the light and went back to bed, but an hour later, it was on again. This happened night after night, always at the same time, 3:13 a.m., the exact moment my grandfather had died. At first, I thought it was a wiring issue, a timer gone wrong, but the electrician found nothing. My parents joked that it was Grandpa, making sure I wasn't afraid of the dark. I laughed along, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. The light felt different, warmer, softer, almost comforting. But there was something else, too. A presence, just out of sight, watching over me. One night, I decided to stay awake, to see if I could catch the light turning on. I sat in bed, eyes fixed on the crack under my door, waiting. At exactly 3:13, the light flickered on, casting a golden glow across the floor. I got up, heart pounding, and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the air felt thick, charged with something I couldn't name. I walked to my grandfather's room, the door slightly ajar. Inside, the air was colder, the shadows deeper. I stood in the doorway, listening, and for a moment, I heard his voice, soft, distant, calling my name. I stepped inside, and the light in the hallway flickered, then went out, plunging the house into darkness. I stood there, frozen, listening to the silence. Then, slowly, the light came back on, brighter than before. I felt a hand on my shoulder, warm and gentle, and I knew, somehow, that I wasn't alone. I whispered goodnight, and the light dimmed, fading to a soft glow. After that night, I was never afraid of the dark again. The light still comes on, every year, at 3:13 a.m. I like to think it's my grandfather, watching over me, making sure I'm safe. Maybe it's just a trick of the mind, a way to hold on to someone I loved. Or maybe, just maybe, some lights never go out. So if you find yourself lying awake at night, staring into the darkness, remember this: you're not alone. There's always a light, somewhere, waiting to guide you home. There's a reason we tell these stories, a reason we gather around the glow of a screen or the flicker of a campfire, sharing the things that make our hearts race and our skin crawl. It's not just about the fear, though that's part of it. It's about connection, about knowing that someone else has felt what you've felt, seen what you've seen, survived what you're still trying to forget. It's about shining a light into the darkness, even if just for a moment, and finding that you're not alone. Maybe you've never seen a shadow move at the end of the hall, or heard your name whispered from the woods, or felt the cold breath of something unseen on the back of your neck. Maybe you've never ridden a bus that never stops, or found a room that shouldn't exist, or answered a call you wish you hadn't. But you've felt fear. You've lain awake at night, listening to the house settle, wondering if that creak was just the wind or something more. You've pulled the covers up a little higher, turned on the lamp, checked the locks one more time before bed. We keep the lights on because it makes us feel safe, because it pushes back the shadows, because it reminds us that we're in control, even if only for a little while. But the truth is, the things that scare us most aren't always out there in the dark. Sometimes, they're inside us, memories we can't shake, regrets we can't outrun, questions we're afraid to ask. The stories we tell are a way to face those fears, to give them shape and voice, to make them just a little less powerful. And sometimes, the stories are warnings. They remind us to trust our instincts, to listen to the little voice that says, "Don't go in there," to pay attention to the things that don't feel right. They teach us that it's okay to be afraid, that courage isn't the absence of fear but the decision to keep going anyway. They remind us that we're all human, all vulnerable, all searching for a little light in the darkness. If you've made it this far, if you've listened to these stories with the lights on, maybe you're feeling a little braver, or maybe you're just more aware of the things that go bump in the night. Maybe you'll sleep with the lamp on tonight, or maybe you'll turn it off and face the darkness head-on. Either way, you're not alone. There are others out there, listening, watching, waiting for the next story to begin. So the next time you hear a strange noise in the middle of the night, or catch a glimpse of something moving just out of sight, remember, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to keep the lights on. It's okay to tell your story, to share your fear, to reach out into the darkness and hope that someone reaches back. Because in the end, that's what these stories are really about, not the monsters or the ghosts or the things that wait in the shadows, but the people who face them. The people who survive. The people who keep going, even when the world feels cold and dark and full of things we can't explain. So thank you for listening, for sharing this space, for letting these stories into your life. Maybe they'll keep you awake tonight, or maybe they'll help you sleep a little easier, knowing that you're not the only one who's ever been afraid. Either way, remember, the light is always there, waiting for you. All you have to do is turn it on. And if you ever find yourself alone in the dark, just remember, you're not alone. There's a whole world of people out there, keeping the lights on, waiting for the dawn.